Prologue. The King of Spades begs. The rain fell on the capital like a funeral drum. It had not touched the man standing on the rooftop. The downpour parted around him, as if afraid to dampen the shoulders of his stark, black uniform. He was known to the underworld as the King of Spades, commander of the most feared mercenary legion on the continent, a man who had broken sieges and toppled minor lords without a flicker of emotion on his scarred face. Tonight, that face was pale. His hands, which could snap a steel blade, were trembling. Before him, in the shadow of a gargoyle, stood a silhouette. No grand armor, no glowing sigils, just a worn archival assistant's coat, dark trousers, and the posture of a man who would rather be anywhere else. Rain soaked his brown hair, plastering it to his forehead. He looked like a clerk who had taken a wrong turn on his way home. This was Corbin Finch, and he was late for supper. My joker, the King of Spades' voice was a raw, shattered thing, stripped of all its command. The reports, they are confirmed. It is not a raid. It is not a war. It is an erasure. Corbin said nothing. His mind, his damnable perfect memory, was already cross-referencing. The scattered attacks on northern outposts, the vanished trade caravans, the weird silence from the mountain passes. His eidetic recall assembled the pieces into a picture he had desperately hoped was wrong. The shadow-wreathed legion has crossed the bleak mountains. The king continued, his eyes wide with a fear his soldiers would never recognize. 3 cities gone, not conquered, empty, as if plucked from the earth. Our agents in the spades, our best, they send one final signal, then static. This enemy that do not fight, they consume. Corbin finally moved. He pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture of profound weariness. How many? At least 20,000, possibly more. And they're led by things. The old texts were not myths. The Calamity Knights have awakened. The term clicked into place in Corbin's mental archive. Calamity Knights, pre-imperial entities of annihilation. Believed sealed after the God War. Capabilities, unknown. Weaknesses, unknown. A cold, professional dread settled in his gut. This was beyond a bandit king or a corrupt duke. This was a historical footnote that had just torn its way out of the page. The diamond suit reports panic in the royal court. The king whispered, the rain mixing with the sweat on his brow. The hearts say the economy is seizing like a dying heart. The clubs, our eyes and ears are going blind. We are scattered. We are reacting. We are losing. He took a step forward, and to Corbin's horror, the legendary warrior, the King of Spades, dropped to one knee on the wet stone. The gesture was one of absolute submission, absolute desperation. We have followed you in the shadows. We have built your house. We have done your will, unseen and unthanked. The king's voice broke. But we cannot fight this shadow with shadows. We need a sun. We need our joker. He looked up, his eyes blazing with a terrifying hope. The House of Cards begs you, step into the light. Let us, not from the archives, not through notes and codes. Stand before us. Unleash whatever power you have held back, or there will be no world left for you to hide in. The words hung in the downpour. The fate of the kingdom balanced on the shoulders of a man who just wanted to help people quietly. Corbin looked at the kneeling king. He looked at the city below, its lights blurred by rain, the tavern where he was supposed to be eating stew, the archive where he found peace, the fragile normalcy he had built with 1,000 secret good deeds. It was over. All of it. He closed his eyes for a second, accessing the cold, flawless catalog of his mind. Every combat manual, every historical account of total war, every anatomy chart, every weakness of every monster, every logistical treatise he'd ever skimmed. He synthesized it, cross-referenced it with the king's report. Strategy, insufficient data on primary threat. Immediate action, consolidation. Unify the 4 suits. Create a single, visible point of resistance. Morale, critical. Leadership, required. A profound, weary acceptance settled over him. The kindly archivist retreated. What stepped forward was something simpler. Ruthless. A page ready to be finalized. He opened his eyes. The gentle confusion was gone, replaced by a focus so sharp it seemed to cut the rain. "Get up," Corbin said, and his voice was different. It was quiet, but it carried the weight of a closing tomb. It was the voice of the final page. The King of Spades rose, a flicker of awe cutting through his terror. "You have 3 tasks," Corbin said, his words falling like stones. 1. Rally every ace, king, queen, and jack to the neutral ground at the Shattered Keep. Sunset tomorrow. No excuses. 2. Use every diamond asset to buy all the saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur in the central provinces. I don't care about the cost or the attention. 3. Tell no one of this meeting. "And what will you do, my joker?" the king breathed. Corbin turned, looking toward the distant, unseen mountains where the darkness was gathering. The rain streamed down his face, but his expression was utterly calm. The time for hidden kindness was over. Now was the time for a visible, final mercy. He said, "am going to the royal court to have a chat with the prince." He took a step toward the rooftop's edge into the void. "But first, I need to borrow a sword, a quiet one." And without a sound, the most dangerous man in the world, dressed as a clerk, melted into the storm, leaving a king of spades with his first spark of hope and his first true taste of fear. Welcome to Novella Station, where every tale begins with a whisper and ends with a scream. Tonight, we find a legend in the most unlikely of places, the silence between the pages. The story is entities of calamities, and it won't let you sleep easy. Chapter 1. The Quiet Archivist and the Missing Spice. The smell of old paper, dust, and lemon oil was Corbin Finch's sanctuary. It was a clean, quiet smell, full of order and silent history. The Grand Athenaeum's archives were a labyrinth of towering oak shelves, stuffed with scroll tubes, leather-bound folios, and crackling parchment maps. Sunlight, thick with motes of dust, fell in slanted pillars from high, clear-story windows. It was, to Corbin, the most peaceful place in the bustling heart of the capital, Viridian. Here, he was not a myth. He was Clerk Third-Class Finch, a man of 24 with an unremarkable face, kind but tired brown eyes, and a perpetual smudge of ink on his right thumb. He was known for his preternatural ability to find anything, his quiet demeanor, and his terrible habit of forgetting to eat lunch. "Finch," a voice barked, shattering the morning quiet. Master Archivist Thaddeus, a man whose body was mostly beard and exasperation, loomed over Corbin's desk. The city watched quarterly expenditure reports for the reign of King Allard III. Procurement ledgers, specifically. The Lord Treasurer's office is in a state. Corbin didn't look up from the crumbling genealogy he was restoring. Aisle 7, black shelf, third bay from the east wall. Bottom 2 shelves. The procurement ledgers are filed behind the garrison maintenance scrolls. The ink is iron gall, so warn them the pages are brittle. Thaddeus blinked. "How do you never mind?" He scribbled note. "And the trade route maps for the Amber Sea from 80 years ago? The Merchants Guild is disputing a tariff." Aisle 3, map case gamma. The third portfolio from the left. "Be careful. The seaworm glue is failing on the eastern quadrant." Corbin finally glanced up, offering a faint, apologetic smile. "Shall I fetch them, sir?" No, I'll send an apprentice. You finish whatever that is." Thaddeus stomped away, muttering about human indexing systems. This was Corbin's world, a world of concrete, catalog facts. He loved it. Here, chaos was a misfiled document. A crisis was a spilled inkpot. It was manageable. It was safe. His peace was interrupted not by another demand, but by a presence. He felt her before he saw her, a slight change in the air, a shadow that fell without blocking the light. He carefully set down his magnifying glass. "You're late," he said softly, without turning, "and you're favoring your left leg. The cobbles by the Silk Street fountain are uneven. You rolled your ankle on the third one from the west side 2 days ago. You haven't let it heal." A low, rich chuckle sounded behind him. "One day, that trick is going to be genuinely terrifying." He turned. Leaning against a shelf, arms crossed, was Alara Vance. She was a royal guardsman, though out of uniform today, wearing practical dun-colored trousers and a fitted tunic. Her dark hair was braided tightly back from a face that was all sharp, intelligent angles and amused green eyes. A long, thin scar bisected her right eyebrow, a souvenir from a smuggler's knife, a story she'd told him over cheap wine. She was also, though she would vehemently deny it, his only friend. "It's not a trick," Corbin said, gesturing to a stool. "It's observation. The mud spatter on your boot is orange red, only from that particular square, and your stride is 2 centimeters off. It's simple." "Simple," Ilera echoed, sinking onto the stool with a grateful sigh for her ankle. "Right. Well, this simple observer owes me a lunch. You promised. The rusty ladle. Stew. Today." Corbin's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying him. He'd been engrossed in a treatise on pre-imperial irrigation and forgotten to eat. Again. "So I did," he admitted. "Good. Because I need to complain. Officially." Her playful tone hardened just a fraction. "They've got me on the most frustrating, nebulous assignment. Some kind of phantom." Corbin began carefully cleaning his tools, his movements methodical. "A phantom? Someone called the Joker." She watched him. "Heard of him?" Corbin's heart performed a slow, cold somersault in his chest. He kept his hands steady, lining up his pens with exacting precision. "Aisle 7. Black shelf. Third bay. Breathe. Sounds like a minstrel's tale. Work hard sharp." "That's what I said," Ilera grumbled, accepting his non-reaction. "But the captain is dead serious. Money moves where it shouldn't. Small conflicts get resolved mysteriously. Competitors to certain trade houses have astonishingly bad luck. There's a whisper of a whole network operating under the royal court's nose. They call it the House of Cards. Supposedly has factions named after the suits. Hearts, diamonds, spades, clubs," Corbin murmured, as if considering the logic. "Childish, right? But the pattern is there. And now, with these weird rumors from the northern border, missing patrols, strange lights, the captain thinks this Joker might be involved. Wants me to sniff around the underbelly, see if the phantom has a footprint." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "It's absurd. I'm a guard. I'm meant to stop pickpockets and break up tavern brawls, not chase fairy stories." Corbin felt a pang of profound guilt. He looked at his friend, earnest, duty-bound, slightly out of her depth, and hated the lie that stood between them. He wanted to tell her it was all nonsense, but he couldn't. The House of Cards was far too real, and its accidental architect was the man carefully wiping ink from his fingers. "Maybe it is just stories," he said, his voice gentle. "Competitors blame their failures on a shadow. People see patterns in chaos. It's human nature." Ilera studied him for a long moment, then her face softened. "You, in your quiet wisdom, you should have been a philosopher, Finch, not a dustmonger." "The dust is quieter," he said, offering a small, genuine smile. "And the stew at the rusty ladle is calling. My treat, for your phantom pains." She laughed, the sound warming the cool, silent aisle. "Deal. But I'm ordering the bread bowl, too. My ankle needs compensation." As they walked out of the archives into the bustling, sun-drenched street, Corbin's mind was no longer on irrigation. It was a vault, whirring with new, alarming data. Ilera. Assignment. Investigate the Joker. Royal Guard awareness. Elevated. Risk of exposure. High. Countermeasure. He was still running scenarios when they pushed open the door to the rusty ladle, into the warm, fragrant chaos of the tavern. And he saw it immediately. At their usual corner table, a man was waiting. He was enormous, built like a siege engine, with a shaved head and hands that could crush tankards. He wore the simple, tough clothes of a caravan guard, but his boots were too fine, his posture too still. He was toying with a simple iron coin, flipping it over his knuckles with a dexterity that belied his size. On the table before him lay a single playing card, the ace of spades. The coin flipped. The card seemed to pulse in the dim light. The giant's eyes, cold and gray as a winter sea, found Corbin's across the crowded room. They held no greeting, only a silent, urgent message. The king of spades had sent a messenger, and the message had found him in the one place he was supposed to be safe, with the one person he could not afford to scare. Alara, oblivious, was already waving to the barmaid. 2 stews, Sella, and a loaf of that black bread. Corbin's sanctuary of stew and simple friendship had just been breached. The quiet game was over. The first card had been played, right in front of the guard who was hunting him. And lunch, he realized with a sinking heart, was going to be very, very complicated. There are no friendly lunches in a city of whispers. As a hero complains about phantoms, the phantom himself is handed a message. The game is no longer quiet. The next course is served only on Novella Station. Chapter 2. The bread, the stew, and the uninvited guest. The world narrowed to the card on the table. The ace of spades, its stark black symbol a-scream in the cozy, smoke-hazed room. It was a breach of every rule, every sacred protocol Corbin had established through years of anxious suggestion. The spades were meant to be ghosts, specters of violence that only manifested in the dead of night, in forgotten alleys. They did not sit in well-lit taverns at high noon, one table over from a royal guardsman. Alara, blessedly, was still focused on the barmaid. An extra butter, Sella, the good stuff in the Highlands. Corbin's mind, that perfect curse machine, engaged. Threat assessment. Variables 1. The ace, likely Hawk, the first man he'd ever helped, now the commander of his most blunt force suit dash. 2. Alara, observant, trained, currently off-duty but never truly off-duty dash. 3. The public setting, crowded, noisy, potential for catastrophic collateral damage dash. 4. The message, itself an alarm bell. The king would only break protocol for something dire dash. Objective, neutralize the encounter. Extract the message. Preserve cover. Time, approximately 3 seconds before Alara turned back to the table. He moved, a clumsy stumble, as if his foot caught on a warped floorboard. He lurched forward, his hand flailing out and catching the edge of the ace's table. The heavy iron coin the man had been flipping went skittering across the wood. Corbin's other hand, moving with a blurring speed that was the antithesis of his clumsy body, swept across the tabletop. When he straightened, mumbling an apology, the playing card was gone, vanished into his voluminous clerk's sleeve. The ace Hawk didn't flinch. His winter-gray eyes tracked the coin, then rose to meet Corbin's. In that shared glance, a universe of information passed. Corbin saw the apology in the old soldier's gaze, but beneath it, a bedrock of grim urgency. This was no social call. Watch your step, clerk. Hawk's voice was a low grind of stone on stone. He picked up his coin, his massive fingers closing over it. The floors are uneven. Sorry, Corbin babbled, the picture of flustered embarrassment. He retreated to their table just as Alara turned, pulling out her chair. What was that? She asked, eyeing the huge man with a guard's automatic appraisal. Clumsy, Corbin sighed, sitting. Almost ruined that fellow's lunch. Alara's gaze lingered on Hawk for a critical second. Caravan guard, or ex-legionnaire. See the way he holds himself? That's drilled-in posture. And those hands, they've seen work. She shrugged, turning her attention to the arriving bread bowl. Not my problem today. Today, my problem is this phantom joker and missing spice shipments. Corbin's ears pricked, even as he accepted his stew. Spice shipments. Alara tore into the black bread with relish. 3 caravans from the southern spice routes. Vanished without a trace between the port of Salina and the capital. No bandit signs, no wreckage. Just poof. Guilds in an uproar. Treasury's nervous. Captain thinks it might be the work of this house, trying to manipulate prices or show their reach. She took a bite, speaking around it. It's probably just a new, smart bandit king. But it's my phantom to chase. Missing spice caravans. Southern routes. No evidence. The data points clicked into the archive of his mind, linking to other fragments. A rise in the price of dreamsage in the apothecary quarter. A whispered report from the Ace of Hearts about unusual financial pressure on a minor trading consortium. It was a disconnected puzzle to Alara. To Corbin, a shape was beginning to form, and it made the card in his sleeve feel like a shard of ice. He listened, nodding in the right places, as Alara detailed her feudal morning, questioning nervous merchants who knew nothing, checking guardhouse reports that showed nothing. All the while, he was acutely aware of Hawk, a silent statue of looming intent 2 tables away, slowly nursing a single tankard of ale. The stew was eaten. The bread was gone. Alara leaned back, patting her stomach. Right, that's the fuel I needed. Back to the grind. Chasing shadows. She stood, wincing slightly as she put weight on her ankle. You should get that looked at, Corbin said automatically. Says the man who treats paper cuts with archival glue, she snorted. I'll rest it tonight. Same time tomorrow? I'll need to complain more. It's therapeutic. Of course, Corbin said, forcing a smile. He watched her weave through the tables and out into the street, the sunlight swallowing her. The moment the door swung shut, the atmosphere at his table congealed. The sound of the tavern, the laughter, the clatter, seemed to recede, leaving only the silent pressure radiating from the man with the iron coin. Hawk rose. He didn't walk to Corbin's table. He simply moved to the now empty chair opposite and sat, his bulk making the wood groan. He placed the iron coin on the table between them. It was not a coin Corbin saw now. It was a token stamped with a simple, stark symbol, a spade. The king sends his deepest apologies for the directness, Hawk rumbled, his voice barely audible. The channels are compromised. A club was taken in Selena, the one watching the southern routes. Corbin kept his face neutral, his fingers tracing the rim of his empty stew bowl. Inside, his mind was racing. Compromised. A club captured. Southern routes. Spy caravans. Talk. The missing caravans, Hawk said, leaning in. It's not bandits. It's not the Joker's enemies. It's something else. Our agent's last report, before he went silent, was confused. He spoke of the drivers and guards just walking away from the wagons. No fight. No coercion. Just leaving everything and marching into the deep-root woods. Like they were sleepwalking. A cold finger traced Corbin's spine. Sleepwalking. Compulsion magic. Old, forbidden arts. And the cargo? Gone. But not plundered in any normal sense. The spices were left to spoil. Only one thing was taken from each caravan. Hawk's gray eyes locked onto his. The manifests. The parchment lists of what was being carried. And for whom. Corbin went very still. Not theft for profit. Theft for information. Someone wasn't interested in the spice. They were interested in the patterns of trade, the network of merchants, the flow of goods into the capital. It was an intelligence operation. A prelude. The king believes this is the opening move, Hawk whispered. A test of our awareness. A probe. And with the club compromised, they may be coming for the house itself. Corbin's gaze fell to the spade token. The quiet, manageable chaos of misfiled documents was gone. This was the real thing, a threat that didn't just want to disrupt order, but to understand it, dismantle it, and use its own blueprints against it. And Alara was poking around the edges of it with a guard's badge and righteous frustration. He reached into his sleeve and slid the ace of spades card back across the table. Tell the king, Corbin said, his voice now devoid of any clerkly hesitation. It was the calm, flat tone of the final page. Secure the shattered keep. Silence all other compromise channels. He is to send no more messengers to me. I will find the source of this probe. Hawk's brow furrowed. Alone? My joker, the Risk. The Risk is a royal guardsman named Alara Vance who is now officially investigating the Joker and missing spice caravans. Corbin cut in, his words soft but final. The risk is exposure. You will be a shadow. You will watch Alara. You will ensure no harm comes to her from our side or from this new curiosity. Do not be seen. Understanding and a flicker of shame crossed the old soldier's face. He had brought the shadow to his master's doorstep. He nodded once, a sharp, military acknowledgement. It will be done. And Hawk, Corbin added, as the man began to rise. The ankle, the third cobble from the west by the Silk Street fountain. See that it's fixed. Quietly. A ghost of a smile touched Hawk's stern mouth. Yes, sir. He left as silently as he had arrived, the spade token disappearing into his fist. Corbin sat alone in the aftermath, the smell of stew and bread suddenly cloying. The phantom was no longer just Alara's assignment. It was a real, breathing enemy, one that stole men's minds in trade manifests. And it was moving while the House of Cards was looking the wrong way, bickering over suits and symbols. He placed a few copper coins on the table for the meal. His path was clear. He couldn't use the house's network. It might be poisoned. He couldn't go through official channels. That was Alara's path, and it led to a dead end guarded by confusion. There was only one source of raw, unfiltered information left. The place where people with secrets went to offload them, where fear and greed talked in their sleep. He stood, the unremarkable clerk, once more. But his destination was not the quiet archives. He was going to the drowned quarter, to the gutters where the real phantoms lived. He needed to find someone who had seen men walk into a forest and never come out. And to do that, Corbin Finch would have to become exactly what Alara was hunting, a shadow in the city's underbelly, asking the wrong questions, hoping the right answers didn't get him killed first. To find a ghost, you must walk where the light drowns. In the filth of the drowned quarter, a clerk becomes a predator, and a scholar reveals a taste for cold, clean murder. Follow the whispers down on Novella Station. Chapter 3, Gutters and Whispers. The drowned quarter earned its name. It was where the city of Iridian slouched into the river Greymane, a tangle of sagging timber, houses built on stilts, slick cobbles, and perpetual damp that smelled of fish, rot, and cheap lantern oil. The grand spires of the royal district were a taunting silhouette against the dusk sky. Here, the light came from behind grimy windows and the occasional brazier, painting the fog in shades of urine yellow and blood orange. Corbin Finch moved through it like a local ghost. The hesitant clerk's gait was gone, replaced by a fluid, economical glide that kept to the deepest shadows. His worn archival coat was inside out now, showing a drab, stain-mottled gray lining. A charcoal smudge darkened his jawline. In the space of an hour's walk, he had erased himself and become another piece of the quarter's anonymous gloom. His target was a place called the Leaky Bucket, a tavern that wasn't for drinking. It was a clearinghouse for information that was too hot for the market squares and too valuable to rot in the gutter. To find who had seen the caravan men vanish, he needed the quarter's nervous system. The gossips, the runners, the informants who saw everything and understood nothing. He paused in a reeking alley across from the tavern, his eidetic memory overlaying the scene with data. 2 guards at the door, private muscle, not city watch. Pay to look mean and break knees. Windows high and barred. 1 main entrance. 2 likely rear exits. 1 through the kitchen midden, blocked by a pile of rotting barrels dash. 1 through a false cellar door that likely fed into the sewer, his best bet for a swift exit dash. The sound from within was a low, anxious hum, not the raucous laughter of a drinking den. He was about to step out of the shadows when a new variable entered the equation. A clatter of hooves on whetstone. A sleek, enclosed carriage, black lacquer gleaming despite the filth, pulled by 2 matched grays, rattled to a stop in front of the Leaky Bucket. It was an obscenity in this place, a jewel in a mud puddle. The driver, a figure in a heavy cloak, remained still as a statue. The tavern door opened before the carriage door did. Out scurried a weaselly man named Pickers, a known information broker with fingers in every rotten pie in the quarter. He was wringing his hands, his face a mask of obsequious terror. The carriage door opened. A boot emerged, fine, black leather, tooled with a subtle geometric pattern. Then a figure stepped down. He was tall, slender, dressed in an immaculate suit of charcoal gray that seemed to drink the foul light. His hair was silver, swept back from a pale, ageless face dominated by sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a winter lake, pale blue and utterly devoid of warmth. He carried a simple, polished walking cane of dark wood. Corbin's mind scrabbled for a file. Silver hair, pale eyes, court fashion in the slums. No direct match. But the cane, the head was a smooth orb of obsidian. It was a style affected by certain auditors and legalists from the contemplative chapter, a powerful, quasi-religious order that handled the kingdom's laws and its deepest, driest histories. They were scribes, philosophers, and ruthless bureaucrats. They did not visit piss-soaked taverns in the drowned quarter. The silver-haired man said nothing to Pickers. He simply glanced at the tavern door. Pickers all but fell over himself, scurrying back inside. The man followed, his cane tapping a precise, rhythmless tattoo on the cobbles. The two guards outside seemed to shrink in on themselves. Contemplative. Here. Now. The coincidence was a gunshot in Corbin's mind. The chapter dealt in information, yes, the dusty, official kind. Not caravan gossip. Unless the caravans weren't about spice at all. Unless the manifest pointed to something an archivist of a different kind would value. He had to get inside. The plan of a quiet, anonymous inquiry was ash. He needed to hear this conversation. Moving to the alley's end, he found what he was looking for, a corroded drainpipe and a series of crumbling brick ledges. His final page style was not for flashy acrobatics, but for pure, silent efficiency. In 3 fluid motions, using leverage and precise foot placement, he was on the slippery slate roof of the adjoining tannery, its stench overwhelming. He crawled to the shared wall with a leaky bucket, finding a warped shutter over a storage loft. A slight pressure at the right point, and the rusted latch inside gave way with a soft snick. He dropped into darkness, landing in a crouch on a pile of empty, sour-smelling sacks. The rumble of voices from below was clearer here, filtered through wide floorboards. He was in a low loft used for storing empty barrels. Below, the main room of the tavern was a tense tableau. The silver-haired man stood in the center of the room, which had cleared around him like oil from water. Pickers was babbling, wringing a dirty rag at his hands. Swear on my mother's grave, Master LYR. I've put the word out. The Deeproot Woods are bad business. Always have been. Men say there's old magic there, things that whisper. Master LYR. The name clicked. LYR of the Contemplative Chapter. Specializes in pre-imperial resource allocation and logistical esoterica. A historian of supply chains. Corbin's blood ran colder. Whispers are not data, Pickers. LYR's voice was a dry, smooth parchment, devoid of inflection. I require facts. The manifest listed a consignment of dreamsage and white spindle root. Common enough. But the quantities and the buyers. He tilted his head, a predator considering prey. You provided the shipping schedules to our mutual friend. Now he is gone, and you are here. The connection is inelegant. It wasn't me. I just move information. I don't ask why. Pickers squealed. But you will answer what? LYR said softly. He didn't move, but the pressure in the room spiked. What else was on those caravans? What did your club friend say before his mind became so untidy? He knows about the club. Corbin froze. This wasn't a chapter investigation. This was the enemy, the probe. And they were here, cleaning up loose ends. I don't know anything about clubs or spades. Pickers was crying now. He just said the men walked away, that there was a song, a faint song on the wind, and they just followed it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched LYR's lips. A song. How poetic. He raised his cane, not to strike, but to point the obsidian orb at Pickers's trembling forehead. Thank you for your service. Your account is settled. A tiny, almost invisible pinprick of violet light flickered at the cane's tip. Corbin acted. He didn't jump down. He fell with purpose, aiming for a stacked pyramid of empty wine kegs beside LYR. He hit them with a controlled crash, sending barrels exploding and rolling across the floor. The tavern erupted into chaos, shouts, and scrambling. In the confusion, Corbin was a blur of gray. He didn't go for LYR. He went for Pickers, yanking the petrified informant behind the overturned tavern bar as a violet beam of coherent light, sorcery, cold and precise, sliced through the space where Pickers's head had been, scorching the wood. Time to go, Corbin hissed in Pickers's ear, his voice now a graveled street snarl, nothing like his own. Who? A friend of the club. Move. He shoved Pickers toward the kitchen door just as one of the tavern guards lunged at him. Corbin didn't fight. He redirected. A slight shift of his hips, a guiding hand on the man's wrist, and the guard's own momentum sent him crashing face first into the bar top with a sickening crunch. The second guard hesitated, his eyes wide. Corbin's gaze found LYR's across the chaotic room. The chapter man looked intrigued. His head was cocked, as if observing a rare insect. He made no move to give chase. That was more terrifying than any rage. Corbin dove into the reeking kitchen, past a screaming cook, and out into the alley. Pickers was a whimpering heap against the wall. Not here. Corbin hauled him up. They'll have the streets watched. The sewers. Now. The what? No, I can't. You can die here, or you can live in the shit. Choose. The graveled voice brooked no argument. Pickers chose the shit. As they vanished into a grated runoff tunnel, the icy, observant eyes of Master Lyr watched them go from the tavern door, his obsidian cane tapping once, thoughtfully, against the frame. The probe had been discovered, and it had found something unexpected. Not a club, not a spade, but a swift, efficient shadow who moved like a librarian and fought like a fallen god. The game had just acquired a new, fascinating piece. Beneath the city, in the dark and the stench, empires are born from gratitude and terror. An informant begs to join a legend, and a reluctant king remembers how his crown was forged, one accidental kindness at a time. The foundation of shadows is laid on Novella Station. Chapter 4. The Sewer Sanctum. The smell hit first, a thick organic reek of centuries of waste, diluted by river water and choked with the tang of fungus and rust. Then came the sounds, the distant, echoing drip of water, the skittering of rats, and the low, omnipresent rush of the current in the main channels. The sewers of Iridian were a city beneath the city, a labyrinth of brick, stone, and despair. Corbin moved with unsettling certainty. He didn't hesitate at junctions or peer down dark tunnels. His perfect memory replayed the crisp, dry lines of the Architectural and Municipal Maintenance Atlas, Volume 3, Subterranean Conduits, revised 312 post-imperial dash. The archive's dust was in his nose as clearly as the sewer stench. Left at the junction with the keystone marked Alderman Fry, 301. Follow the secondary sluice for 200 paces. The refuse grate before the King's Way outflow will be rusted but sound. Pickers, on the other hand, stumbled and retched his fine clothes, fine for the drowned quarter, now filthy and torn. By all the dead gods, how do you know where you're going? He gasped, splashing through ankle-deep sludge. I read, Corbin replied, his voice still rough, an affectation he maintained. It was easier than explaining eidetic memory. You're not a club, Pickers wheezed, a spark of his broker's cunning cutting through the panic. They're ghosts, whispers. You're a hammer. But you knew the code phrase. A friend of the club. I'm a friend who gets things done when whispers fail, Corbin said, guiding them into a drier, older side tunnel. The brickwork here was pre-imperial, massive and ornate, now crumbling. It led to a circular chamber where a collapsed section created a small, dry alcove littered with forgotten debris, a smuggler's hideout from a bygone era. Here, we can breathe. Pickers slumped against the wall, sliding down to sit in the muck, heedless of it now. He was a small man, made smaller by terror. He was going to kill me. That light, that was chapter work. But not any magic they teach. That was something old. Nasty. Lyr, Corbin said, the name hanging in the foul air. What does the contemplative chapter want with missing spice manifests? It wasn't about the spice. Pickers spat, a desperate energy in his eyes. It was about the routes, the patterns. The manifests listed secondary consignments, waypoints, payment schedules. They were mapping the entire southern trade web. My contact, the club man, he figured out too late. Said it felt like someone was learning how we bleed, so they could cut the right artery. Corbin leaned against the opposite wall, the cool, damp stones seeping through his coat. Learning how we bleed. The phrase echoed. This wasn't robbery. It was diagnosis. And Lyr's presence confirmed the diagnostician was from one of the most powerful, respected institutions in the realm. The enemy wasn't in the shadows. It was in the library, the courthouse, the treasury. It was the system itself, turning malignant. Why come to you? Corbin asked. The clubs have their own channels. Pickers barked a wet, bitter laugh. You really aren't one of them, are you? The house it's brilliant, but it's tight. A sealed vessel. For big things? Sure. But for the little noises on the street, the rumors that don't yet have a shape, they use people like me. Independent contractors. Safer for them. Until it isn't. He wrapped his arms around himself. My life's over up there. LYR's people will be painting the quarter with my description. I'm a loose thread. He looked up at Corbin, a sudden, desperate hope in his eyes. But you're connected. You knew the phrase. You moved like I've only heard stories. You're with them. The real ones. The House of Cards. Corbin felt a profound weariness. He looked at Pickers, scared, resourceful, now homeless, and saw the ghost of a retired soldier named Hawk, 20 years younger. A man he'd helped on a whim, with medicine and a silent promise of protection. Hawk had seen a mastermind. He'd seen a purpose. He'd taken that seed of kindness and built a legend around it, recruiting others he deemed worthy. The disgraced knight who became the king of spades, the bankrupt merchant princess who became the queen of hearts. Each one Corbin had quietly aided. Each one had looked at his modest, efficient solutions and seen a grand design. He hadn't built the house. He planted a single tree of decency. His aces had seen a forest and built a fortress within it, naming each tower after a suit in the deck he'd used to teach them simple codes. His attempt to be a background character had instead created the most compelling supporting cast in the kingdom, who now insisted he was the lead. And now it was happening again. Pickers was looking at him with the same awe. The snowball was poised for another downhill roll. The house isn't a club you join, Corbin said, his feigned roughness fading into his own, quieter tone of resignation. But it is. Pickers insisted, leaning forward. Do you have any idea what they've done? The Bloodhand Marauders? Wiped out to the last man 3 years ago. The records say internal dispute. I know a spade who drank here who said it was a single 4-hour operation. The famine in the Eastern Reach stopped because mysterious benefactors restocked the granaries. The corrupt tax master general who was strangling the docks? He had a sudden, profound religious awakening and donated his entire fortune to an orphanage before vanishing into a monastery. Pickers' voice dropped to a reverent whisper. They don't just fight or bribe. They fix things. They make problems cease. And nobody knows who. That's power. Real power. Corbin listened, a stranger hearing the epic of his own life. He remembered each incident. The Bloodhand had been about to raid a village where a kindly old seamstress who'd once mended his coat lived. The famine relief had been a complex rerouting of grain shipments he'd orchestrated to save a single farming community on the brink. The taxmaster, he'd simply provided evidence of the man's secret family to his furious wife. Small solutions to immediate pains. But through the lens of the house, through the relentless, amplifying competence of his followers, they had become geopolitical masterstrokes. It was terrifyingly effective, and it had made him a slave to his own reputation. You wanted to save your skin, Corbin stated. I want in because out there is chaos. Pickers gestured wildly upwards. LYR and his kind, they're systematic. They don't want gold or territory. They want the blueprint. And the only thing in this city that's ever been a check on that kind of cold, grinding order is the house. Let me be a jack. The jack of clubs. Or just a lowly number card. I know every whisper in the drowned quarter. I could be useful. The plea hung in the dank air. Corbin saw the inevitability. Leaving Pickers out here meant his death or his capture, both of which would lead LYR closer. Bringing him in meant expanding the web, creating another believer who would interpret his every sigh as doctrine. But the final page style was about optimal solutions. And the optimal solution was control. All right, Corbin said, his voice quiet and final. But you work for me, not the house. Me. You are my independent contractor. You hear a whisper about LYR, about the chapter, about men walking into woods. You bring it to me. Alone. Through the drop at the public baths on Gray Street. You tell no one of this place, and you never, ever look for me. You're a ghost reporting to a shadow. Understood. Pickers' head bobbed so fast it was a blur. Understood. Yes, a shadow. Perfect. And your first task, Corbin said, pushing off the wall. Get yourself to a safe hole you have that even the clubs don't know about. Lie low for a week. Then, find out where LYR goes when he's not terrifying informants. His habits, his real work for the chapter. Not the public face. The quiet hours. I can do that, Pickers said, a glimmer of his old professional pride returning. Corbin nodded. He'd just created another card for his accidental deck. The guilt was a familiar weight. But as he led Pickers out of the sewers via a forgotten culvert that emptied into the river reeds far from the quarter, he knew the calculus had changed. LYR wasn't just a threat. He was a paradigm shift. And against a man who collected blueprints, the loosely knit, myth-powered network of the house might be dangerously transparent. He needed to see his king of spades. The shattered, keep meeting couldn't wait. The house, for all its terrifying effectiveness, was about to face an enemy that didn't fight with swords, but with filing systems and soul-scorching light. And its reluctant architect was the only one who understood both worlds well enough to see the coming collision. Not all power wears a crown. Some wears a ledger. Meet the man who bankrolls phantoms and steers kingdoms from a sunlit room, now calculating the price of a war that deals in souls, not silver. The balance sheet of doom on Novella Station. Chapter 5. The Ace of Diamonds sums the cost. Lord Alastair Fane, Earl of the Amber Hills and chairman of the Viridian Mercantile Exchange, was a man who believed the world ran on three things: leverage, ledgers, and light. At this moment, standing in the solarium of his riverside estate, he was critically short on the last one. Dawn was a gray smear over the river, doing little to dispel the chill in his bones. The solarium, a masterpiece of glass and imported steel, felt like a cage. In his hand was not a stock report, but a simple playing card. The Ace of Diamonds. He'd found it tucked between the pages of his personal household accounts, the one ledger no secretary ever saw. It was a dismissal of every lock, every guard, every layer of privacy wealth could buy. It was a message that said, "We are here. We have always been here. You belong to us." And the worst part was, he'd put it there himself. Voluntarily. 5 years ago, Alastair had been on the brink. A rival consortium, backed by a duke with more ambition than ethics, had launched a coordinated assault, sabotaging his shipments, bribing his regulators, framing his heir for treason. The law was a tool in his enemy's hands. His wealth was a leaking cistern. He was weeks from utter ruin, a trophy for the duke's wall. Then, a solution arrived. Not as a person, but as a series of flawless, anonymous events. The key witness against his son recanted, citing a crisis of conscience after a mysterious visit from a charity worker. The corrupt regulator was found to have embezzled from the duke's own coffers, turning his patron against him. The sabotaged shipments were miraculously intercepted and replaced, the cost anonymously covered. And with it all, a single, handwritten note on plain stock. A balanced ledger is the foundation of a stable society. Your expertise is required. Keep this card. Await contact. It was the ace. He'd kept it a sacred totem. When the contact came, it was not a demand for payment, but a request for insight. A question about obscure trade laws, an analysis of a noble house's liquidity. Alastair, a man drowning in gratitude and awe, poured his formidable intellect into these queries. His answers, he later realized, became policy within the shadowy ecosystem of the house. He was not a mere beneficiary. He was a resource. He was the Ace of Diamonds. He'd never met the Joker. His contact was a serene, terrifyingly competent woman known only as the Queen of Hearts, who handled the suit's finances and moral calculus. But through her, he saw the house's reach. It wasn't just fixing problems. It was gently, inexorably steering the kingdom. It created stability because chaos was bad for business. All business, from street-level trade to the crown's taxes. In a way, Alastair had found his life's purpose, using his mastery of systems to maintain the greatest system of all, a functioning, predictable realm. Now, staring at the card, he felt that stability crack. The summons had come an hour ago, not through the usual dead drop or coded tray bulletin, but via his own 11-year-old daughter. She'd handed him a folded piece of her own sketching parchment. A funny man with nice eyes at the park gave this to me. He said Papa would want to play the game. Inside, in a handwriting he knew was designed to be untraceable, were 3 words: Shattered Keep. Sunset. The Queen of Hearts would never be so sloppy, so emotional, as to use child. This was panic. This was the King of Spades' blunt force methodology bleeding into the refined world of diamonds. It meant the protocols were collapsing. It meant the threat, the one whispered about in the most secure channels, the LYR situation, was worse than anyone had let on. My lord, his steward, Graves, stood at the solarium entrance, his face impassive. The morning briefings, cancel them. Alistair said, his voice hollow. I'm unwell. See that my daughter remains within the grounds today. Triple the household guard. Discreetly. Understood, my lord. Graves didn't blink. The man had been vetted by the Queen herself. Alistair turned the card over in his fingers. The House of Cards was not a government. It was a silent, collective nervous system for the realm, and he was a ganglion in that system, processing the data of power and money. Its effectiveness was sublime. It had prevented wars by making them unprofitable for all parties. It had toppled tyrants by quietly evaporating their credit. It had, he suspected, even smoothed the succession of the current prince, ensuring a ruler more given to bookkeeping than battlefield glory. But a nervous system could be poisoned. And what was LYR if not a neurotoxin? An agent of the contemplative chapter, the kingdom's own institutional memory, turned predatory. The chapter didn't want money or titles. It wanted control of the narrative of history itself. They were the ultimate auditors, and they were auditing the house. He walked to a paneled wall, pressed a hidden sequence, and a small compartment hissed open. Inside lay not gold, but his true treasures, folios of analysis, risk assessments on every major noble house, flowcharts of imperial trade dependencies, his work for the house, and a single, plain ledger, the diamond ledger. He opened it. It didn't list debts owed to him, but stability metrics, trade variance in the southern routes, within acceptable parameters, noble house debt-to-income ratio, amber status, monitor. It was a physician's chart for the kingdom's economy. The last entry, added in his own frantic hand last night, was different. Contemplative chapter liquidity request, 500,000 crowns, source, archival retrieval fund. Unprecedented. No corresponding budgetary line. Denied by Treasury, our influence dash. Chapter reaction, muted. Probing action likely. They had tried to use official channels to fund their probe. He blocked it, and now they were operating with unofficial, terrifying tools. Like the light that had scorched a tavern bar. He was a man of leverage, and for the first time, he felt the leverage shifting to a foe who didn't respect the rules of the ledger. You couldn't bankrupt a fanatic. You couldn't reason with a guided beam of sorcerous light. Sunset at the Shattered Keep. He would go. The diamond suit needed to be represented. The stability they had all built. The stability that let merchants plan, that let children play in parks without fear of conscription or famine, was under a new kind of siege. It was no longer about fixing a corrupt official or routing bandits. It was a war of ideologies. The house's pragmatic, hidden stewardship versus the chapter's cold, absolute desire to catalog, comprehend, and control every variable. He slipped the ace of diamonds into his breast pocket, over his heart. The card was no longer just a symbol of membership. It was a weight, a responsibility, and perhaps a target. As he watched the sluggish gray river carry the city's detritus out to sea, Lord Alistair Fane, Ace of Diamonds, did what he did best. He began to calculate the cost of the coming war, not in gold, but in broken systems and lost peace. The numbers, for the first time in his life, refused to add up to anything but fear. If you like the part 1 of Entities of Calamities, stay tuned and subscribe to our channel. More to come only on Novella Station. Like the video and tell us in the comment what kind of stories you want to listen to at your own channel.